Whoa. Okay. We are in the shop right now. It's later in the evening. Let's see here. Let's bring this a little down because I want to sit down. Yeah, something like that. Just a second. Okay. Whew. That's a little bright. So just turn this way a little. Okay. Whew. Okay, live stream. Totally off the cuff stuff again. I am going to schedule these things, I promise. I'm just working out the last little piece because now that the network is working really well, actually, because the last live stream got me to, let me just double check here. Yeah, we're on the right one. The last live stream got me all the way to the back of the back arena, which was insane. It was amazing. Just a second here while I open up. I want to be able to lean back like this a little. Let's see. 2 seconds. Um, 360. Okay. So hopefully the live stream is coming through well. I've got my other phone here so that I can keep an eye on chat without having to lean up against the phone that's up there and answer any questions that come through. So I'll just check this one here. Okay, so very busy. I haven't had a lot of time to put together normal horsey check videos. I know a lot of people enjoy that, and that's cool. All of us are doing great right now. We're really busy today. We have lessons, and yesterday was lessons and trimming, so I don't usually get a lot done on the weekend because there are a lot of other people um, sort of doing things, and I'm usually involved in that, so I'm not holding the camera while going about doing that. So instead, I thought maybe I would do a question and answer video because I've been getting a lot of questions about horses and the cold. Now it's cold outside. We've got some chilly temperatures recently. Well, it's winter here in the northern hemisphere. I know you guys over in Australia or the southern hemisphere have much warmer temperatures. In fact, drought conditions in some places, so that sucks. But it's chilly here, and a lot of the viewers that come on right now and they're asking questions are usually because we're posting a lot of winter stuff, especially the the brain freeze question, which was kind of interesting. Anyways, it's attracting a lot of questions on how horses deal with the cold, how horses manage if it's really cold, if it's rainy, do they need shelter, do they not need shelter, what are the conditions that require horses to stay warm. And the answer is always a little bit varied. It's always kind of it's always one of those it depends or based on the circumstances that you have, based on the circumstances that the horse is in, you may or may not need to blah blah blah. You may need to do something or may not. Um, so I thought I would make, because it's just sort of on my mind, and you know how this goes. When I do a live stream, I'm usually kind of just blurting something out that is just rolling around in my head that I can't get out. And since so many questions are coming in, I'm gonna answer them. So When it comes to dealing with the cold for the horses, uh, the general science behind it is that horses are very large animals, and um, they generally have a harder time shedding heat than they do keeping heat. So, case in point is a lot of people will shave their horses if they work them, if they train them hard. They'll shave them in the wintertime and get rid of all that extra hair because they heat up so quickly and they stay hot, they sweat, and it becomes quite unhealthy for them and uncomfortable for them. So when they do get that way, they tend to have more problems, some health problems and whatnot. And um, what the solution for that obviously is to take the hair off. So when we look at it that way, we look at the horses are big animals. They usually grow a heck of a lot of hair or fur, whatever it is, in the wintertime. They will they will get warm and generally keep warm rather well. Shedding off that heat is actually a little bit difficult. They're big animals. Take for example birds or mice or lots of smaller animals. Usually have a hard time staying warm in the winter because they're so small. Their body mass doesn't physically create enough heat to keep their internals warm. So somebody had said something funny. He says, "Well, when you start talking about blanketing, I don't want to get into a big debate about blanketing, but somebody had said, well, how many cows do you see out in fields that are wearing blankets?" And I thought it was funny, but it's a good thing to sort of think about for these larger animals, these herbivores that go out and all they eat is grass or hay, and in some way somehow they stay quite warm. Um, so science tells us, the science and the proof out there tells us that horses are big animals. They stay pretty warm, and they don't shed that warmth very easily. So a lot of the questions that come through, well, when does a horse, is it okay to have a horse out in the cold? How long should you keep them out for? Um, should you worry about them when they're out and about, you know, being in the cold, in the snow? Mostly not, especially if they haven't been shaved. So I think it goes without saying that if you shave the horse, you're really reducing their ability to keep their warmth in and get warm. Because just like with the birds, as we said, with their feathers, when a bird will puff itself up. So if you see a horse that's looking rather puffy, it's because the hair follicle um, is standing up, and the scientific word for that is piloerection. So essentially, the hair on their skin is maybe laid down flat mostly, but when they get cold, just like we do as well as people, their hair will start to stand up and stand tall, and it'll make um, this pillow of air that exists, from the outside to the skin. Within there, there's this insulation layer of air, and it's one of the reasons why in houses, if you put insulation in, you don't squish the insulation. Um, I don't know how many of you know that, but if you ever put insulation in anything, you want really fluffy insulation. So when they blow the insulation in your roof, in your, above your ceiling, your top floor, and they put it in the attic kind of thing, they blow it in and it just billows up into this cushiony substance. Same with the walls. You don't squish it in. It's thick because it's full of air. Now, air is a great insulator when it's combined with other stuff. Temperature doesn't pass through air very easily. Uh, so, and so when the fur is standing up, it creates that air pocket. So if they're shaved, they don't have that. That compromises their ability to get warm and stay warm. It doesn't mean they're not big animals, and they have very thick skin. And they also have a great ability to sort of close things down so that their blood doesn't reach skin level and carry that cold in. So everything will get more constricted. And that's just science. That's something that is completely provable. Um, So with all that combined, if you're worried about your horse being out in the cold, think about that stuff and know that mostly they're just fine. Um, but there are other factors to think about when you're wondering whether or not your horse is going to be okay for long term, more long term. And let's see. The first thing you have to think about is whether or not they've got food. So I always say this in the comments. So somebody asked me in the comments, when do you know the horse is getting cold? Does my horse need shelter? How long can it stay in the cold? How can you tell a horse is in distress? Things like that. And I did a video a long time ago, actually, of Luke, who had gotten cold out in a field that he was at, a place we were boarding at. And we went and got him because there's this sort of freak hail / rainstorm that came in. And we went and got him and brought him in, and he was shivering. Um, Now, there are multiple reasons for that. And so the video shows what a horse looks like when they're shivering. Essentially, they're doing what we're doing. They're shaking, but their major muscles are shaking. So you'll see their legs shaking. You'll see their shoulders shaking. Um, and those are the chest will also show convulsions. And these are normal reaction to being cold. So you know a horse is cold if it's shivering. I'll see if I can remember later to link in the description of this video, so you guys don't have to go look for it, of that video, what a shivering horse looks like. And YouTube crashed, as always, somewhere around the 12-minute mark. Thanks, YouTube, for making such a great application. So I was at a point, I think I'd made it to the point where we're talking about Luke shivering. But anyway, so the big muscles will be shaking. The shoulders, the flank, the sort of the stifle area, and the hip area will be convulsing. So then you know your horse is cold. It's a cold horse. So once you've got that figured out, then you know you got to do something. Now, what contributes to that is another thing altogether. We always tell people when you're worried, the questions come in, how do I know? What should I do? What kind of shelter? There are some, there's at least three main things that horses need to stay warm. One, they need to be healthy. They need to be in pretty good health, something that isn't old or sick of some sorts. Two, they need food. We can't stress enough, if you're worried about your horse staying warm, most of the time, just make sure it has enough food to never stop eating. If a horse can eat, they constantly keep their system moving. They're constantly bringing energy in to create heat energy, the byproduct of them making food and chewing it and absorbing it and going through the system. It's all heat. So the biggest thing that I would say contributing to horses getting cold is no food. The place that we had Luke at was not a place that gave 24/7 hay like we do here. And in turn, he probably hadn't eaten for hours. And so that's a big, huge contributor to horses getting cold. And so that's number two. Number three is shelter. Now, shelter is one of the questions that comes up a lot. What kind of shelter? Does it need to be closed off? Do we need to have four walls, a little tiny door? Or can it be more open? Does it just need to have a roof? And for the most part, I would say that most shelters will be just fine with just a roof. But the other part of that is you have to consider whether or not it's super windy. And if it is windy, is it rainy too? Does the horse get all wet? Now, a lot of horses, when it's raining and when it's windy, they'll put their butt to the wind and rain, and that'll just come in and it won't hit them in the chest, shoulders, head, along their neck, which brings up another topic when it comes to shaving. The other thing you don't want to do is cut their forelock or their mane. If you go out in the wintertime or anytime and you put your hand, you just slide it underneath their mane. It's really, really warm. If your hands are ever cold, go find your horse, put your hands underneath their mane, and just sort of tuck them up under there, and your hands will warm up really quickly because it's an insulated area. So you want to try to provide a shelter that can keep their body out of the rain. So, like I say, if it's windy, wind's coming in, rain's coming in, they're getting wet and they're staying wet, they can't get dry. I would say, yeah, absolutely. Stick some walls on there, protect them from the wind if you can. I mean, that all said, a lot of horses just go stand out in the wind and rain anyways. It's kind of weird, but they do. Um, but the bigger factor still comes down to, do they have food? Are they eating? Are they able to keep themselves warm through, the consumption of grass or hay on a continuous basis? So the answer to the question about, which I'm getting a lot now, about how can horses stand the cold and how cold can it be before you really have to step in and do something, is going to depend on the environment they live in, the health of the horse, and the conditions the horses are being kept under. For the most part, horses don't really need much. A lot of times they go and roll in the snow. If it's snowing, they'll happily get themselves all soaking wet, and then they shake off some of that water. They're pretty oily creatures too, so a lot of the water will just shed right off. And if they're creating enough heat, they'll actually just, evaporate all that water off anyways. So I'd say 90% of the cases out there, if you're providing food, if they're healthy and unshaven and untrimmed on their mane and stuff, they have their natural ability to keep warm intact, they're going to be fine. There's the other 10% that you have to sort of keep an eye on. You got to check to see whether or not they are shivering. You got to check to see whether or not they're not moving much at all. A warm horse will tend to kind of move around. Colder horses will tend to just sort of stand still and conserve that energy for heat production. Mother Nature takes care of them pretty well, I guess you could say. Their natural biological abilities to ward off the cold and keep in the heat are very strong, surprisingly, really, really good. So hopefully that answers that question. I really want to talk about the cold, because that question, those types of questions are coming in a lot. Got one question so far. Chalpin, hello. Speaking of shaving, what are the reasons for it? Good looks. The majority of people that I believe are shaving their horses or trimming them do it because they train hard. They train hard enough. I don't know about training hard. I guess that's going to be objective. But they might train hard enough that that horse would regularly be sweating, be working. I can hear a mouse. He's up high. Anyways, forget about that. Majority of them are working kind of hard, and they're going to start sweating. And when they start sweating and they can't get that heat off, if they're still got their fur coat on, they stay pretty wet. And then you have to, think about if you need to dry them off. So they'll be shaved because they're in training mode and a lot. They're not going to be out and about frolicking around. There are some people, I believe, also that shave their horse because they think it looks much nicer. They think it looks very trim and neat and tidy, especially the ones that are going to shows. Because in the shows, in the show culture, there's a high value put on horses that look groomed to human standards. And so you get a lot of that. Trim off the whiskers, trim the ears, trim the body, cut the mane, cut the forelock, all those kinds of things that make them look to the show world very attractive. And so you have those as well. So you have both, and it could be a combination of both. It could be a combination of high-end training, and also because, hey, it looks good to those people who manage those horses. So those are the main reasons. Yeah. Makes sense. Hey Samantha, good to have you from Australia. I have no idea what time it is there. I was just talking about how it's cold here, hot there. Wish we had some of your warmth because I'm not a big fan of it. The sound is low. Anybody else having a problem with sound? I don't know. Let me check. Testing one, two, three. No, if I turn up my volume, I'm pretty good. Yeah. So turn up your volume maybe. I'm talking at a reasonable level. The phone's not very far away. So maybe just tap 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 on your volume key a little. Yeah. Anyway, so hopefully it comes through better. The subject is talking about cold. I also want to talk a little bit about hooves, but making sure that I get sort of the cold topic. 2:45. Oh yeah, it's 8:20 here at night. First time I've done an evening live stream, but I've been sort of answering these questions in the comments about the cold. I thought I'll just do a live stream. Maybe if the people that are posting questions are coming around, uh, asking the questions then and seeing this now. So okay, Angie says, when it's too much food, I want horse to eat 24/7, gains weight fast. She looks like Lena. She looks like Lena. She must be a really good looking horse. Um, Too much food. Well, in the wintertime, it's hard to say what too much food would be. Talking quickly about food then. Okay, so hey, I really recommend people get their hay checked out. We get tested hay here, making sure that it doesn't have huge sugar spikes. So we don't get low sugar hay. I don't think it's required for the horses that we have. Um, but some people do require low sugar hay, especially the horses that eat too much and get too fat. You might need to go to a low sugar hay, which still allows them to have enough roughage in their body to kind of keep themselves moving, keep uh, their um, their system running, keeping warm, especially in the wintertime. But if you give them high sugar hay, they'll consume. It's like eating a bunch of donuts and stuff, and you can eat too many donuts, obviously, but you couldn't really eat too many crackers. Just a basic cracker, not something else. But I don't believe. I mean, depends on your feeding, how you're feeding. So if you have normal hay, normal sugar, normal proteins, normal vitamins and minerals that are supposed to be in that hay, we feed our horses 24/7 here, and they're in hay bags with little 1-inch holes. So they take a while to burn through that much hay. The general consensus is that you feed your horse 10 to 20% of their weight. 10 to 20? Well, that doesn't seem right. No. 2 to 5% of their weight. Let me think. 2.5%. What is it? Somebody help me out. Anybody? Do. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's 2. Anyway, it's about 25 pounds for a 1,000-pound horse, which I guess is 2.5%. Um, that's a general consensus. Now, we don't weigh our hay. We don't weigh anything. We just give it to them. And they're all doing pretty. Oh, this is distracting. And they eat. We more measure um, sort of by weight of how much it takes to carry it, like how heavy it is. We say, oh, it's a heavy bag, or this is kind of a light bag. They'll probably go through this faster, and they do. They will tend to go through those lighter ones much quicker. You're like, oh, well, should have put more in there. Um, but all the horses here have their own speed of eating, and they have a little bit different speed of eating if another horse is with them too. So I really recommend people sort of pay attention to how much their horses eat. I don't believe they can eat too much of good hay. High sugar hay, absolutely. But highly recommend 24/7 hay. The moral of it, the conclusion of it all is have your hay tested, or buy tested hay. Don't go getting your hay tested. It's such a pain in the butt to do. But buy hay that comes with a paper that shows that it's been tested, how much sugar. There's two different types of sugar. I won't get into all that nutritional stuff. But you're looking for, is there a high iron count? Does it have calcium? Does it have phosphates? What's it got in it? If you get a nicely balanced, good amount of protein hay, then if you then feed your horse that on a regular basis, because all our horses are fed 24/7, and they're not a bunch of fatty patties out there, other than Lena, who's a draft horse, and she's never been any different ever. She's not gaining nor losing, so that might be her general normal weight. So, gauge that. If they look like they're gaining weight based on the hay you're giving them in a reasonable amount, you're not going through, 10 flakes a day or something, or a whole bale for one horse, which would be silly, depending on the bale weight, I guess. So there's that. Our bales are 120 pounds. So one horse would last off of one of those, for a few days kind of thing. If you get just a normal 50, 60 pound bales, one horse can go through those a couple days or so, and so if you find your horse is going through too much, then get a smaller hold hay bag. And if you find that they're going through that and gaining weight, get something with lower sugar. If they're not gaining weight and they're losing weight, up the quality of your hay. So, it's a hard question to answer unless, and then are they exercising? Do they get a lot of out time? They just stand around a lot. So, a lot of questions in that regard. Kathy says, hello. Hi, Kathy. Do the horses get fungal infections in their hooves? Okay, so now, if anybody else has any more questions on cold stuff, let me know. If not, horses get fungal infections in their feet all the time. There's two places that they'll generally get them. The first place is the frog. As many will know, it's thrush. Thrush is so common. Thrush is ridiculously common. It's very, very prevalent in so many horses out there, and it's a shame. It's preventable and it's fixable. So anybody who has a horse that have fungal infections in their horse's feet in the frog, it's preventable. You can fix it. The other place that they will get fungal infections is in the white line, and if you'll, not that one, just a second. There it is. Okay, so with a few examples here, I've got a hoof here. So a lot of horses will get it in the frog. There'll be a fungal infection somewhere in this, what's called the sulcus here, which will carry up the back of the, let's turn that around, the back of the hoof in between the bulbs and stuff. You'll get an infection that will sort of carry up through here, and you'll get what's called the butt crack. So you'll know that your frog is infected. It's problematic. It's a big deal. So the first location is the frog. The next location that these fungal infections can happen is in what's called the white line. And the white line of the hoof, so we've got the frog here. These are, this little bit here is called the bar. We've got the wall. And in between this area, which is called the sole, and the wall, there's a little area in here called the white line. And it goes all the way around. And it also carries around the heel and in the bar. because the bar is just hoof wall. So when they'll get um, these little punctures inside of the white line in here, because essentially it's much weaker and less dense than the sole and the wall. And it's sort of the weak spot, I guess you could say, of a hoof. So when stuff gets in here and it sort of punctures through and starts to get trapped, maybe you've got the walls get a little long and they might curl under, or the sole will start to come over or something, and that stuff gets trapped in there. A lot of times you'll see in the bar wall or the heel, the seat of the corn is this area here, and in the quarters. And in many cases, the horses that haven't been trimmed in a timely manner at all, they'll get long toes. Now this horse is pretty good. He or she, I don't know, has actually got a great breakover here, and it's quite, let's see, it's quite level with the sole and the white line. But say for example, another one here doesn't. Let's see if I can get this right. The wall has really come up, and this horse, I mean, this is a little contracted sole, but that's another topic. But these walls are long; they're too long, and the horse needs a trim. So when you get these toe areas here really long, it'll actually mechanically, meaning through the weight of the horse and the way they walk, they'll flick the toe on the ground. So if the hoof is like this and they're walking along and they go like that, it will mechanically sort of pull this upwards, and then in here goes a bunch of stuff. And then they get what's called a crina in there. Here's a coffin bone. And they'll get this, so this is the inside of this is the bone that's inside of the foot. And they'll get these areas that dip down here. You see there's this little dip in the hoof, in the front. So right there. And when they get those fungal infections, it just eats away. Hang on a second. Here's a different coffin bone, and you can see that it's quite smooth. So sometimes when they get those fungal infections, you can see there, this one's pretty bad. Not as bad as another one I've got somewhere around here. Oh, here we go. Not as bad as, say, this one, which is just in terrible shape. See? If you can see that. Really messed up, so that's a bad one. But anyways, so they'll get in, where's my hoof? So it's a great question, the fungal infection question, but they'll get them in, and there'll be a big gap right in here, and there'll almost be a hole somewhere in there, and it'll just start eating away on the inside, and you have to fix that. So some people call it seedy toe. I'll sit a little closer. Some people call that problem where they get inside here. This is just a different one, but when they get the problem up in here, it's called seedy toe. There's also a white line infection. It's all the same thing. It's all just something that's eating away at the materials that live inside of the hoof there. So yeah, horses get all kinds of stuff. Thrush is the biggest one. Admittedly, the frog just deteriorates, and it's painful for the horse. So good question. Fungal infections, yeah. So you want to have a good environment, good trimming, and good management of the hooves themselves for when it does happen. So Big topic. I will definitely be putting out a series on that soon. Okay. A smaller whole bag for, yeah, working great. So. Yeah, all right. Sleeps for scratches for the horses will do. If you're watching this later, I will be screechy scratching everybody. A smaller whole hay bag, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you find your horse is gaining weight, you have two options. One, you can reduce the energy content of your hay, proteins, sugars, um, or just make it harder for them to eat as much as they eat. And in the beginning, you can sort of pay attention to how much you're giving them, how many flakes, um, and weight. So some hay bales will come and say the smaller ones, they're a little less regulated than the bigger ones, and um, they'll you'll pick them up and they'll be 40 pounds or something, and then another one will be 60 pounds. The ones we get that are really heavy, they're almost always a straight, 110, maybe 120 pounds. They're usually pretty precise. So I wouldn't say go by flake. Definitely go by weight, like how it feels. You'll get a you should, if you don't already, you'll get a feel of how much hay is there. There could be four flakes and it could still only be 15 to 20 pounds, or it could be four flakes and weigh 35 pounds. I mean, be half a bale and be dense and heavy. All right, next question. How much do you think oh, hi, Isis. How's it going? How much do you think the cotton wool can rebuild after proper treatment? Some of those look like old horses. Any idea? No, I don't have any idea of how old these things are. Um, None at all. The horses don't come with any history when you pick up their legs from the stockyard. You can sort of tell the age based on how holy, like how Swiss cheesy they are. Generally, a younger horse will not have this. A younger horse will be a lot more dense. So let's see if we can get this in. So you can see how, I'll try to stop moving this so we get the best picture. Pretty Swiss cheesy compared to what is probably a lot younger and a more dense bone, coffin bone. The older they get, I believe, the worse they do get. It's true. But I don't believe that all old horses get that amount of decalcification, and I don't believe that they can remodel in a very healthy way once they have decalcified. I haven't seen any proof of that, and I'm not capable of doing the scientific test uh, due to lack of data, lack of possible data to do that. I would rely on studies and people who are more dedicated to do that kind of work. So far, I haven't seen anything. The remodeling and decalcification usually goes in the negative direction, and surprisingly, it's for the protection of the horse. So, they decalcify and remodel upwards so that they don't go through the sole of the hoof itself. So, big deal. Um, which infection is fungal and which is bacterial? I wouldn't say that I know exactly either. I would imagine it's more bacteria. The fungal stuff would be pretty stinky, so it's probably fungal. We sort of address both with the materials that we use for that anyways. They both kind of get, because thrush is what is called anaerobic, meaning that it hates oxygen. So bacteria, I think, doesn't thrive in oxygen. Fungal stuff does. So we treat and open and hopefully catch everything. And then just good healthy trims and good environment. You can't have an environment that invites that to live there. So clean environment, horses that are moving around and sort of scraping off their own feet as they go is quite healthy. So, hello, Kay. Thanks for popping on in, and hello, Adam. Um, moving on. Next question. Well, that's it. Okay, we're done questions right now, unless you guys have more questions. But I really wanted to sort of um, discuss the cold stuff. As for hooves, though, people ask also, is there anything to do in the wintertime for hooves? I've had some people suggest that their hooves, horses' hooves grow slower in the winter compared to summer, things like that. And I haven't seen any proof so far that horses' hooves grow slower at any time of the year. When we trim horses, most of the time I'm wishing they would slow down. I would say summertime may appear actually that it goes slower because the ground is harder and they wear their own hooves down to sort of self-manage. Spring and fall around here is a lot more soft, and if they're out in pasture, then they'll have very little opportunity to wear their feet off. So I don't know if growth speed changes. I don't believe it does, but I do believe that the wearing off process changes based off of the environment that the horses are living in, and essentially how much exercise they get. I have some clients that I show up and there'll just be a couple of parts of the hooves that are really long because they don't wear them down. And it's amusing because you can tell who rides their horses and who doesn't ride their horses and what environment they ride them on. If it's on trails that have gravel and rocks and stuff like that, or if it's in a nice soft arena, or if they just go on nice soft pasture and stuff like that, those are all things that, over time you sort of collect in your own brain and think, oh yeah, I know what's happening here. And then each trim sort of becomes custom to the horse that's being trimmed and how they manage. So, Angie says, how do you spot an abscess? Well, I have found there are generally two types of abscesses that happen in horses. It's my understanding that all abscesses in horses are essentially an infection that is happening on the inside of the hoof. The hoof wall is super duper hard, like your nail. And so there's no way for it to escape other than up or back, or even down sometimes when you'll get what's called a subsolar abscess. Those are the nasty ones. But what has happened for an abscess to happen is that something has got in there and the body of the horse hasn't managed it before it turned into an infection. So you'll get swelling, heat, because it's an infection and the body's trying to fight it, and pressure. So you spot an abscess, and a lot of abscesses go undetected and they just blow out and the horse is fine. Some really hang in there and they don't blow out very well. They don't have an easy access, an easy exit point. So you've got a couple of causes. Usually it's some kind of puncture. It could be a nail. It could be rocks. It could be a weak point in the hoof. And it almost always and invariably goes in through the white line of the hoof. The ones that go in and then come out the back usually are the ones that have gone in through the bar. Unmanaged bars will cause these kinds of problems. And the ones that sort of blow out the top have usually entered through the white line. As we said earlier, the white line being this area, or the white line of the outer hoof wall is this whole area in there. You can spot an abscess usually, almost always when you're trimming, you'll find you get that. You'll see it right away. Horse will usually be pretty sensitive. You can feel the hoof on the outside. Um, if it's different than all the other ones, it's really warm, you probably have a problem. Um, when in doubt, obviously, just ask your vet or farrier to come out, take a look at things, see if something needs to be opened up. Um, I I don't. I'm not going to particularly recommend something. What I don't recommend is sort of cutting out an abscess. You want to be able to relieve that pressure. So I have seen where you make just a pinhole um, in the either the bar wall right here, in here. There's going to be bar wall. You might be able to make a little pinhole there if that's where the abscess is. Sometimes you can sort of take out the quarters a little bit, but a lot of times it's going to pop out the cornet band where it's soft and flexible, or out the back and the heel bulbs and the heel. So a lot of the times it resolves itself. Once it blows out, it usually spits out the stuff that's causing the problem. Um, or you can draw it out with a poultice kind of thing. So hopefully that answers your question about abscesses. They're reasonably, I'd say they're kind of common, depending on the conditions of the horse and condition that they're riding or living or walking in or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad horse husbandry. They get them. Sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it just happens. But good hoof care and good environment can reduce the frequency and chances of them getting one. Yeah, that's probably everything. Okay, next question. Adam says, Sue says hi from California. Hi, Sue. Thanks for coming in. What is colic with horses? Colic. Well, it's a major killer of horses. Colic is colic's a big deal because one, it kills horses through impaction of the digestive system of the horse. And what's going on could be that they are getting like something is packed in there and it can't get through. In other cases, it can be twisted intestines that end up stopping material from continuing. So the horse will keep on eating and eating, but it just gets stuck in there and it becomes very painful for the horse unless you can flush it out somehow. So the bad cases are the intestines get sort of wound up and they bind, and then the material can't get through. The hay, grass, whatever. Those are the bad cases, and sometimes require a vet to come in, cut them open, move things around, fill them up with water, and so on and so forth. A lot of times horses will get it worked out themselves. They'll stretch, they'll roll over, they'll do all kinds of things to sort of relieve that. And a lot of times it just goes away. Sometimes it requires veterinarian care. They'll fill them up with water, mostly, and that water will hydrate them more. And then cause things to flow better so that they won't be all stopped up and stuck and die. So oh yeah, colic kills a lot of horses, and it's sad because it's mostly preventable, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I'm not saying it's a fact, but I think colic is mostly preventable. There's the odd case that it isn't. Horses are not the smartest animals around if you give them a big chunk of food. Some people have given grass clippings or really dry food that they might not have enough hydration to process properly. Um, Starvation and then gorging is known to cause colic, which is all human related. You know, we're causing these horses the colic. If they had enough clean, fresh water, would they drink more? Yes. If you give them dirty, old water, if you don't give them water at all, much higher chance of colic. If you don't feed them and then suddenly you feed them and they got a gorge, much higher chance of colic. Um, Free feeding, just straight hay all over the place, can help with that because usually horses kind of go around and they just take blade by blade by blade by blade. But our hay flakes are in big bunches, and so they can take this huge mouthful. And if they're really hungry, they might not chew it enough, and then they've got this big hunk of hay that goes down into their stomach, and it continues on, and you get the idea. So. Um, I've seen the abscesses been treating with Lysol soaking. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't soak a foot in Lysol. Um, I think Lysol is primarily bleach, if I'm correct. Bleach is. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know. Um, Lysol is a good cleaner, you know, but okay. So let's look at the primary reason of why people soak hooves that have an abscess. The reason you might soak with Lysol or bleach or some kind of salty brine, maybe, um, or a poultice with salt in it. Epsom salts, I think, that's a common thing to do as well. Is you're looking to sort of draw out the liquids while at the same time making it soft, and then it opens up the spot that allowed the abscess to start in the first place. Um, I think that softening a hoof up so that it can blow the abscess easier can be helpful, especially in the summertime when their hooves are rock hard and nothing's coming back out except through the flesh. I don't think I would use Lysol. I don't think it's required for that purposes. I would definitely trim to find out where I think the entry point might be if I was having trouble with that kind of thing, and then while not doing any surgery, I don't remember like some kind of surgical procedure, but you can easily sort of poke a little tiny hole and then pack it. You know, there's a Sugardyne is a popular packing. Some people use. There's different types of clay out there. You can also use that have the same effect. It's cleansing, yet drawing, and people have great. There's also great success with that. There's also another. I can't remember the name. There's a pad that you can buy. It's got everything in it. I think it's the equivalent of Sugardyne, and it's already this pad that's sticky all over, and you just stick it on the hoof and you pack it all around, and it sticks and it stays. You'll want to keep those kinds of things off. If there's any hole in the foot, you'll want to keep those things on so that something doesn't go back in, but you just draw things out, and then that hole will heal up from inside out. Hopefully, after it's either drawn everything out or pushed everything out. That's what you're hoping for. Yeah, that's it for now. So, but for questions, but yeah, in the wintertime, I don't believe that there's anything special to be done other than to keep an eye on excess moisture, lack of movement due to being cold and not uh, um, not they're cold, so they might not move around a lot, and so they might just sort of be stuck in one sort of poopy. You know, if another thing horses will do if they don't feel like moving around is they'll just urinate right where they stand and eat if they're in a stall or a smaller space. And standing around in that kind of thing can be detrimental. The ammonia smells bad for one, but two, it can slowly sort of eat away at good tissues and consistently like that. becomes very unhealthy for the horse's feet. So something to think about in the wintertime for the hooves in that regard. But outside of having a healthy environment, regular food, good movement, um, you would just maintain as usual. Talk to your trimmer, farrier, to see what they think, how the feet are coming along. But generally, no, not so. For everybody who's asked me questions about the cold and that covers all that stuff, and then hooves in the wintertime, because we're going to do a whole bunch of stuff on hooves, hopefully very soon. Generally you just maintain as you're doing, as long as everything's healthy. But things to think about is when they stop moving as much, and they might just sort of, especially when it's raining. Some horses are very adverse to rain. They don't want to go out and get all wet, so they'll just sort of pee and poo in their one spot, and that's where they stand, and yuck. So, tetanus shots for horses. I would highly recommend talking to your veterinarian for all. Oh, for abscesses? No, I don't. I don't. I don't believe tetanus shots have anything to do with abscesses. I've never seen a paper or a study or anybody that I follow or regard as sort of respectable in this area. Yet I might see something, but I haven't yet that says anything regarding having any shots to cause problems with hooves. I know some people say that some shots can cause a horse to founder. I'm pretty skeptical of that. I think that if the horse is foundered, it's foundered for other reasons. But with a compromised immune system and an environment that was already set up to maybe help cause the foundering, I think it might trigger something that was on the cusp of happening. So I guess that's sort of a cause, but no, I've never seen a correlation of tetanus shots to abscesses. Interesting question. I'd like to know if anybody else knows better than I do. That's a hard one, But so far I haven't seen anything. So okay, so that's sort of that covers a lot of stuff. I know it's a later in the evening live stream, and might not get the audience that I usually get in the daytime. I am going to try to schedule these things so that it's not just off the cuff. But there's so many times where I'll get a bunch of questions and it'll just be rolling around in my head, and just answer it here with you guys, and then you can answer or ask more questions if you're curious of what I think about stuff. And with any luck, I'm also sitting in the shop where I can sort of bring my props in and explain certain things that are going on with a horse. Yeah. So that's about it for now. I think I'm going to get on with some chores to do around here, and maybe have a coffee pretty soon here. Yeah. So unless you guys have any other questions, looks like so far no. I appreciate everybody popping in to say hello, and any questions you had to the round table in here. I mean, I'm just monologuing, but it's good. It's good that we're all kind of get together once in a while here and chit chat about our horses and stuff. So wintertime is a big deal. A lot of people do worry. I had somebody ask about skin care in the wintertime too. Cracked noses, mud fever. The last thing regarding hooves. So the topic that I was also going to discuss with the hooves, it kind of travels up the pattern just a little bit, but there's this condition called mud fever, or in the UK, I think it's called scratches. It's also called rain rot. And then there's the clinical name, which is dermis or dermatitis, something. It's a skin issue. I have to go look up in one of my medical books that I've got that gives the exact naming for that. But rain rot, mud fever, and scratches are all generally the same thing. It's a problem with the skin. Something has probably caused some kind of wound. The wound becomes kind of infected and it spreads. I've got a great article on mud fever on the site because we had a horse that had it really bad. And mud fever can be debilitating. It can lame a horse if it gets really bad. And the back legs, usually, or front legs, whatever, any leg, will stock up. They'll get swollen. And so, something to consider in the wetter times and the dirtier times, but this can happen in the summer too, is the mud fever, the scratches can take hold, and you'll have a harder time sort of solving it because the materials you might put on will get washed off too easily. They'll get, they'll come off too easily. And the skin will be a little bit softer and more susceptible to, I guess that's why they call it scratches, because it's more susceptible to getting scratched and opening up the skin a little bit to where the bad bacteria or something can get in there and cause it to be infected. And scabs. So these scabs on the pastern are something you want to keep an eye on. I wouldn't necessarily say that I've noticed it's worse in the winter. In fact, I haven't come across a case of mud fever in quite some time, luckily. I better knock on some wood, but in the wetter season, it's been known to be more prevalent, and you really want to keep on top of that. It's actually very easy to deal with. It's much easier than people probably think, but essentially, you're going to want to just keep it as clean as you can. Wash it well with a surgical wash. You can use betadine really effectively, and you can actually ward off more moisture and other problems by using zinc oxide cream, or if you get it a little bit wet and then just put a bunch of athlete's foot cream on there and sort of rub it around. That's actually very effective as well. And sooner or later, when everything closes back up and there's no wounds, it's gone. So that was the other question I wanted to skin problems. The other one is rain rot. That can occur, I think, any time of the year. Stay on top of it if you can. I've seen horses that have such bad rain rot. You can't touch their back or their withers or their neck without just pulling off scab after scab after scab. And it's really gross. It's really unfair. Totally preventable. Take good care of your horse by giving them good brushings, making sure their oils are spread, reasonably evenly, kind of thing. By brushing them, that helps keep the water and the mud out, and a cleaner environment is probably required. So I'm repeating myself. I feel like a broken record. So, okay, I better get on with things. But those are all the topics I thought I would cover really quickly while they're rolling around in my head. If anybody has any more questions, I think we're done on the live chat, but stick them down below or something. I'll be back tomorrow with my normal schedule of horsey playtime, horsey check, training videos and stuff. So I'll see you guys again tomorrow, I hope. And yeah, thanks for popping on in and giving me your questions and thoughts and stuff. It's fun. It's good to do. I'm glad to see you guys here. So we'll leave it at that. I see nothing more. I'm just checking my other phone if you're ever wondering what I'm looking down at. But looks good. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you. Have a good night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. It's evening for us. I think it's getting on 9 o'clock. So get a little bit done and then take it easy for the night. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow. All right, then.